It's fashionable in certain circles to disparage Britain's role on the international stage. Amid sneers over Brexit, we are told that our nation is living off past glories and we are essentially irrelevant when it comes to the big issues which concern global power and strategy. Those who push such a view always reveal far more about their own misguided, miserabilist outlook than they do about the reality of Britain's place in the world. But Wednesday night's joint announcement by President Biden, Boris Johnson and Australian PM Scott Morrison ought finally to have put paid to the idea that we have no serious role. The past few weeks have seen two hugely significant developments. In its own very different way, the news that the US, UK and Australia are to cooperate in building nuclear-powered submarines as part of a recalibrated strategic alliance is as important as last month's pull-out from Afghanistan. While that was an ignominious defeat for the West, and a sign of the US's increasingly inward outlook, this week's move is the opposite, a welcome and vital move. The key to understanding both of these developments is China. Donald Trump may have been reprehensible in so many ways, but one thing he got right was the danger posed by an increasingly domineering China. We are all aware of the allegations against Chinese companies like Huawei and the stupidity of placing our infrastructure, not just telecoms but even nuclear power stations, in the hands of organizations widely believed to be arms of the Chinese state. Only this week it was revealed how reliance on Chinese money threatens independence at Cambridge University. Academic independence is under threat across the sector. Large parts of the world, especially in Africa, are in thrall to China through its Belt and Road program of investment in third world countries. But China poses a more traditional danger, too. Its military is expanding rapidly. Its navy has more than trebled in size in the past 2 decades. On one day alone in April it added a destroyer, a ballistic missile submarine and an amphibious assault ship to its deployment. There were many reasons for the U.S. to pull out from Afghanistan, but the overarching thread was its inward-looking focus, which means not that it will refuse to look or act beyond its border, but that it is redefining when or why it should. That means concentrating on threats to U.S. interests. And that means China. One of the nations most exposed to the Chinese threat is Australia. With its increased naval power, China has been openly aggressive in the Indo-Pacific. In recent years the Australians have led the way in highlighting the extent of Chinese influence in its affairs, taking much the same form as outlined above in the UK. When the Australian government demanded an international inquiry into the origins of COVID, China responded with a series of trade sanctions, such as putting tariffs of 80% on Australian barley exports. Relations between China and Australia are now non-existent, with all high-level diplomacy cancelled. Australia believes this is the beginning rather than the end of confrontation with an increasingly aggressive China. The US sees China's behavior towards Australia as a treat to its own interests, because it grasps full well that a China left to throw its weight around will not stop with Australia. That means it is in the US's direct interest for Australia to have serious defenses, and that requires more than its current submarine capability. Australia had agreed a $90 billion deal with France for new diesel submarines, but these are only able to stay underwater for a few weeks, at most, before refueling. Under the partnership, Australia will become only the 7th country in the world to have nuclear-powered submarines. Because they generate their own power, they can stay underwater, and undetected, for months, even years. The only constraint is the need for food and supplies. The AUKUS alliance has the advantage of being natural and obvious. All three are members of the Five Eyes intelligence sharing arrangement and have cooperated militarily and diplomatically for decades. For the UK, the strategic partnership is a clear demonstration of the reality of global Britain, and of the inanity of those who still argue that Brexit has reduced our influence. We are perfectly placed to carve a unique and vital role in the defence of freedom.